Okay, and it's saying that we're live. So, welcome everyone. If you're watching this, I'm so excited about today's live. Super excited to have Dr. Lauren with us, who is a sleep vet specialist. So just before we get into that, if you're brand new to the lives, I'm Claire. I run Sighthounds. I work exclusively with Sighthounds and I specialise in X-racing greyhounds. I'm based about 10 minutes from the NEC, but I work with customers online all over the country. And Lauren, Sarah's just putting herself on Facebook and sharing it to her page. So while she's doing that, Lauren, can you introduce a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so thank you for starters so much for having me on. It's absolutely wonderful to be here. As you so lovely said, I am the sleep vet. There's not many people specialising in sleep in the veterinary space, which I think is sad because it's such a fascinating topic. We're going to talk about it tonight. So my background is I am a vet by trade, but I also spent some time making human healthcare mattresses. So I always joke I am the probably the most knowledgeable person in the world about dogs and mattresses simultaneously. So I have my company now, Vet Relief, that I set up 2 years ago now. So we make sleep hygiene products, and then I also lecture on sleep and get to do cool stuff like come and talk to you guys, which is fun.
We're so excited.
Thank you so much, Lauren. So I'm Sarah Hawkins. I run Berkshire Dog Training in Reading in Berkshire. Also key for me is the sleep for a lot of my clients who have got young dogs, very much interested in this topic. But it'll be really interesting because I think it will bring to life a lot more about the older clients I have. We've been very patient, haven't we, Claire, to get you on board. So what penultimate for 2025? You're our penultimate live. So
here we go. So everyone who's gone before me has set a high bar for me to follow.
No pressure. So Lauren, if people are, as I say, the Sighthound community, sleep is such a big topic of conversation. So, and I think we were talking earlier that it is from a human point of view as well. So can you just give us a bit more about the sleep, behind the scenes of sleep, for want of a better word?
Yeah, absolutely.
Bedroom door, isn't it?
We're always talking about sleep all the time, aren't we, as people? And you don't have to be medical for that, right? We were just saying before we came on, you're down the coffee shop with your friend. What are you talking about? You had a rubbish night's sleep, you've snapped at your husband, or, you just can't hold your mental list anymore because you're so tired. It's just, you can't remember things the way that you would normally. Or the other way around, right? That you've been poorly, but now you've had that, that the sleep of the dead, right? I would say I was zonked 12 and a half hours. I've woken up and I say I'm on form now. So we're always talking about how sleep impacts our own kind of pain perception, our own behaviors, our own just general well-being. And then a lot of the time that transition doesn't happen when we're talking about our pets, when actually all of those same things are true. And a lot of the sleep architecture is exactly the same for us, sometimes slightly less well described because there's been a lot more research in sleep than in pets. But where there has been research that's been done the same in both sides, we almost always see that they correlate. So there's a lot that we don't know, but we often work on the assumption then that where there is that grey area, that we're going to be they're going to be guilty until proven innocent, that it's the same for them as it is for us. And that's the assumptions that we work on from a clinical point of view. It's probably the best place to start, I think, is just to give everyone a bit of an overview of what on earth sleep actually is. That having done it every day since you were born, you probably can't define it.
Very good point.
Because despite the fact that we've all done it all through our lives, actually can look very different in different species. For example, jellyfish will pulse slower at different periods of the day, and migratory birds and some dolphins can sleep one hemisphere of the brain at a time, and some of the species of dolphins will micro sleep. They'll sleep for like 0.07 seconds at a time, enough times to sleep 6 hours in a 24-hour window. So what links all of those things as being the same biological process? To force something to be sleep, you have to have 3 things. One is you have to have some level of regulation. That if you don't get enough, your body's trying to get some more of it. And if you have plenty, then you have a little bit less the time after. So that homeostatic regulation, we call that. Always trying to get the right amount for that species. Of course, that's species dependent. And then within that, individual dependent, and within that, age dependent, and all of those other factors. But the body knows what it needs and will try and get to about the right amount of sleep for that individual. The next is ease of reversibility. So that is what separates it from like coma, hibernation, anesthesia, seizure, all of these things that are reduced states of consciousness, but not quite so easy to be brought round from. If you think of sleep startle, which we will, of course, Claire, cover.
Yes, please.
Very rapid reversibility in Sighthounds sometimes, sometimes to their detriment. They come round faster in one part of the brain than the other, actually. So we will cover that in a bit more detail. And the other thing being a posture or pose that's associated with that species. So for us and our dogs, that's lying down, eyes generally closed. Although, of course, Sighthounds again, why are they always the odd ones out? Will, of course, sleep with their eyes open.
Upside down, legs in the air, eyes open.
Exactly. They always have to have their own way of doing things, don't they?
They do.
So once we've got all these three things, that means that we've got sleep. Have you heard of the term sleep cycle?
Yes.
That's something, yeah?
Only because I've done training with you.
We hear about it in human sleep as well. Or when you've got young babies, they say, "Oh, make sure you let them sleep for one sleep cycle." Or they say, if you're going to nap, you need to nap for a whole sleep cycle. Or you're going to wake up groggy because you come through from deep sleep. So it's a thing that we hear about when we talk about human sleep all the time, but we see the same in dogs. And it just means that there are different stages of sleep that they go through while they're unconscious. So we're going to talk about those first, and then I'm going to tell you why I hate the phrase sleep cycle.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to teach you, and then we're going to unpick it. If that's all right.
That's brilliant.
So the way that sleep works is we have to start off with just a period of going from being conscious to unconscious. This is known as N1 sleep. So you just have to have this period of being, I've gone from being awake to not being awake. If you haven't got that, you're definitely not asleep. Which then takes you into, we're going round our circle. So I'm backwards, aren't I? Which way does this round that circle to N2 sleep, which is light sleep. So this is just when your body's preparing for all the good stuff, all the reparatory things that we need to do, resetting all the neurons, remembering everything from the day, processing anything that's happened emotionally. You can't just go straight from being awake to unconscious straight into the work, right? You've got to get ready. So I like to think of light sleep as like the bit before you arrive at work, like having your breakfast and getting dressed and doing your teeth, or just getting the body ready to do the stuff. And we're going to come back to light sleep in a little bit because it's a really fundamental part of sleep hygiene. But once we're ready to do the good stuff, we've got through the light sleep. We then get into N3, which is deep sleep. And I like to think of that as body repair. This is when all your body tissues are resetting, all the neurotransmitters that you've released during the day go back into the neurons, ready to go again. Tissue repair starts to happen. All of these things start to reset from a physical point of view. And then finally, we get into our fourth and last stage, which is REM, or dream sleep, which for a behavior point of view is where the real magic happens, right? This is where we're processing what's happened during the day and preparing to take on board emotional resilience for the next day.
Okay.
And really, really interestingly, if dogs have had, for example, a traumatic incident, a dog-on-dog incident, or they've been stressed left or something like that, they will spend more time in REM sleep that night. And this has been proven, processing what's happened. And if they don't get enough sleep, of course, then that processing can't happen. So it's a direct example of how one day's actions will directly impact their sleep structure of that night to follow. Very cool. And of course, if you're not getting enough REM sleep, that is when you start to be slightly grumpier the next day. You can't take some of those kind of microaggressions or that you might normally brush off. So for us, the example would be, I always use the dishwasher one, right? So normally, if you put everything in the wrong way around, I just go, just get on with my day. But if I haven't slept well, I'm like, babe, I am not had enough sleep to be able to take that
To
kind
process.
of absolutely to be, and I become overstimulated, I become overwhelmed much easier, and that is absolutely what happens in our dogs as well. So recap: N1, going to sleep; N2, getting ready for the good stuff. Think of it like getting ready for work. N3, deep sleep, that's the body repair. And then REM sleep or dream sleep, that's all the behavior stuff. That's brain repair and reset and processing. So if you've got that, you've pretty much got the fundamentals of sleep down. But this is why I don't like it to be called a cycle. What doesn't happen is you do N1, N2, N3, REM, wake up, or start again. And it doesn't work like that. And quite a lot of us are wearing these kind of Apple Watches or whatever, health trackers now, aren't we? And if you look at your own sleep cycles within that, you'll see that you don't do 1, 2, 3, 4, go around again in all night. That's not the way that it works. I like to think of it much more as being like a block of flats. So in order to start being asleep, I have to have a foundation, which means I have to be unconscious. If I'm not unconscious, I can't build any other kind of sleep on top of that. And then next thing, I now need to build my light sleep on top of this, because I have to be prepared. I can't go straight into the work. Just like I can't wake up in the morning and be at my desk. It's not possible for me to do that. There's no way. I have to go through that preparatory stage before I can do work. But once they're here, and dogs are especially very good at this, they can kind of wander between being light sleep and being in that real transitional phase. Dogs are brilliant at that transitional phase. Actually, they actually think that dogs spend about 1/5 of their life in this not quite asleep, but not really awake either stage, just somewhere halfway between the two. And we see it all the time. They're just like kind of there. So,
I'm just amazed how quickly they can sometimes feel like they're in the deepest sleep possible, and you're lying there going, I really want to sleep myself, but your dog is just snoring, and you're just like, how do you I want to do what you do sometimes.
Show me the way.
Exactly, because all of a sudden they are just in that what appears to be that lovely deep really restful sleep, and you're still counting sheep.
Yeah, tell me about it. So once they've done that, they've come through their N1, which they say they can linger in or they can go through very quickly. They've done their preparatory stage, their N2, then they can add deep sleep on the top. So we've now got a nice tall sleep tower, because now they've gone up and built up and we're doing deep sleep now. But they can move from deep sleep now back down and do a little bit more light sleep. They can even come really light and go back into almost transitional phase. And they can now move, think about some steps between these floors. They can move up and down. And finally, we build REM on the top, or dream sleep. And once you've got all of those, they can wander up and down between all of these floors until the time is up on their sleep cycle, somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes. And then it all comes crashing down and we start again and they build another one. And that's the way. Cycle isn't really a very good way of describing that, because actually they're trundling up and down. And that's a simple, when you say the cycle, people say, well, actually, sometimes I've fallen asleep and I wake up 10 minutes later and I was already dreaming. I was like, actually, you might have gone up through those things really quickly in that sleep cycle. And that's fine and normal. And you might well come down. But the problem we find when we have disturbed sleep, if you think that your dog's building, gone to sleep, starting to build, got into light sleep, disturbed. Now we have to start again. Okay. Disturbed.
Yeah.
What happens is every time you're disturbed, your block of flats falls down. Yeah. Which means you can actually then spend quite a long time building through the night, building. I spend a hell of a lot of your time in light sleep. And actually, light sleep, it's better than nothing, but it doesn't make you feel great. And that's why when we find that disturbed sleep, and if you've had puppies of your own, waking you up all night, your own babies, or slept near a train line or something for a couple of nights in a cheap hotel or whatever it is, if you are disturbed all the time, you might have your watch or whatever saying, you might have got 6.5, 7 hours. It's not that bad. Actually, you feel rotten.
Yeah.
And it's because you spent all that time in light sleep because you weren't asleep long enough to access the reparative deep sleep on the REM sleep. And of course, REM comes last. Sorry, guys.
The good stuff.
I mean, Claire, I think that makes it so much more sense, that block of flats analogy.
Yes.
It really does, because, personally, sleep is really difficult for me because of certain things that are going on in my life. And so I can see that element was missing, which was making me very irritable.
I think we've all been there, Sarah.
You're not alone. But yeah, and
I've never heard of that analogy before.
Yeah, and it explains why some, when we look at people, dogs, how different people need different amounts of sleep to other people, and they sort of go, oh, if I've had a good night's sleep, I had X number of hours of solid sleep, but that can be different for other people. And again, kind of going back to the dogs as well, that the sleep quality is different for each species, and so on and so forth. Yeah, fascinating.
I could talk about this all day to be honest. And it's what's really interesting is that there's a protective mechanism around N2 sleep. So and that's our light sleep. Remember, this is our bit when we're getting ready for work, as we said. Yeah. So that's at that point, all of your blood, and in a dog's case, all their blood is draining away from the brain. It's going into the tissues to get ready for the repair stage. But you've still got a lot of sensory input, right? When you're in bed, the stuff coming at you doesn't stop. The truck still rolls down the road. The cat still meows outside the door. Your pajamas still rub on your skin. Your partner still gets up to go to the loo. So what we have in the dog's brain is this really cool structure called the thalamic reticular nucleus. And I promise I won't go too scientific here, but I am going to mention it because it's really cool. I'm going to call it the TRN just so that I don't trip over my own words.
I remember that. TRN, okay.
Yeah, the TRN. So the way the brain works is that all of your sensory input goes to a bit called the thalamus. I always do this because I think it helps people remember. This is your thalamus. Oh, yeah, thalamus. And the job of the thalamus is all the sensory stuff comes in. Everything you smell, everything that you touch, everything that you taste, everything that you hear, everything that you see, all comes into the thalamus. And its job is to sort all of that out and send it to all the right bits of the brain for processing. Now, if you are in early sleep stages, you're really not interested in any of that information, right? You don't want to hear the truck. You don't want to feel your partner getting out of bed to go to the loo. You don't want to feel your pajamas on your skin. You want to go to sleep, right? You don't want to be woken up. So your TRN, it's really clever. It's wrapped around your thalamus and it works like a portcullis on a castle. And it protects the thalamus. And when you are sleeping, it creates these things called sleep spindles, which are one of my favorite things in the whole world, rhythmic firing. And they basically act like a gate. So you've got all this sensory input coming in. And the sleep spindles are like, absolutely not. We're not interested in that at all, and protect the thalamus from all of that incoming sensory information so that you are not disturbed in light sleep. The body has a whole mechanism for that. And it's what's really interesting is we see that in dogs who are sleep deprived, their TRN doesn't work very well. So what happens if you are already sleep deprived, your portcullis, you're protecting your thalamus from all of this sensory stuff, starts to get a few holes in it. So we start to see then that stuff that might not have roused a dog when they weren't already sleep deprived might now start to break through. They call it sensory gating. It breaks through the sensory gate and actually then is processed. So now you are being woken by somebody getting up to go to the loo that might not have woken you before, which is a really interesting, depressing thing.
Wow. Fantastic. Fabulous. So I think Sarah's just asking if anybody's got any questions. Wow, that is amazing. So that is a really good, thank you. I love the apartment analogy. And so basically the less sleep that you have, the harder it is to get good quality sleep, because you're going to struggle to do that. So the more disturbed sleep you have, you're not going to fall asleep as well in the future.
100%. And not only that, if you think about what was happening in deep sleep, I said we clear things like the neurotransmitters, right, that are flooding around in our brain. A lot of your sensory things, for example, your pain sensors, right? So they are quite an excitatory neurotransmitter, as you can imagine. So if you've got pain conditions, they're firing all day, but sleep helps you put all those neurotransmitters back. If you're not sleeping well, you end up with this kind of pain neurotransmitter soup going on in the brain. And then when you wake up in the morning, instead of them all being gone and ready to start again, you have some left over that were already floating around, which means you start to perceive pain more strongly, even though the pain itself might be exactly the same. Because you've got this neurotransmitter soup going on in your brain, you actually find that pain is perceived to be more than it was, despite the original insult being exactly the same.
Right. And like for humans, we do have this like between a 7 and 9 hour window. And so, you know, is there that theory? And also, I think for humans, they say, you know, that before you go to sleep at midnight, it's a better quality sleep. I mean, these might all be myths, but these are ones that I know of, you know, and trying to work out what your pattern is so that if you have a tendency to wake up early. Now, obviously, we might, you know, look at it from a dog's perspective and go, well, especially mine are 9.5 now, and they appear to sleep an awful lot. And I also then at the other end, when I'm working with my young dog clients, you know, they say, well, they seem to be sleeping, you know, but enough, but they just want to play, or I want to keep them entertained. I kind of understand. I believe I need to keep them sort of, you know, if I play with them more, then they'll sleep
more tired.
Yeah, I think, you know, so there's a couple of things I've just thrown at you there, Lauren, but you know, like the first one is about like the volume of sleep that we kind of is how's it compared to humans and dogs in that sense, but also that you know, if I tire them out, will that be better quality sleep, I guess, in that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So you definitely hit the nail on the head a lot of times there, which is great. So for starters, dogs need more sleep than us. So that's a fundamental thing that a lot of people miss when they get a dog, especially for the first time. And you hear a lot of time, oh, the dog goes to bed when we do, and we know it's time to get up because the dog wakes up at 6 for breakfast or to go out for a wee or whatever it is. And that's great. If they're sleeping all that night, that's perfect. But that maybe is I'm lucky if I get 8 hours, but I have small children. But you know, somewhere around 8 hours a night is quite common for a human. But that's kind of us then. We're what we call monophasic sleepers. We sleep once and we do it in that block, and that's us. But that is not enough for dogs. They are between 10 to 14 hours, and that's your healthy adult middle-aged dog. I mean, as we know, just like humans, babies and the elderly can sleep much more than that. In fact, puppies and older dogs can be up to 20 hours a day if they, you know, the very old and the very young. So we need to be able to facilitate that. So that means that your dog that sleeps with you overnight is already, if they don't get any sleep in the day, is chronically sleep deprived.
Right.
Lauren, just on that, there's a great question coming from Angela, which seems perfectly timed, because she said, why do sighthounds sleep so much compared with other dogs? And is there a reason? So I just want to bring that up while we're on this topic, because it goes with what you're talking about.
So interesting. It's really hard to tell if a dog is asleep, or if they're in that kind of very chilled, well, they call it quiet wakefulness is another word for it, that like N1 drifting, drowsy state, because it looks externally exactly the same. And the only way you can actually tell if they are asleep is with proper probes, which we're not going to be doing. No one's going to give ethical consent for that, and for good reason. So it's actually very difficult to know how much time a dog is asleep. You can really only say how much time they're resting. So we'll talk about rest requirement rather than sleep requirement, because the prevailing belief is that the sleep requirement is probably very similar across species. So the rest requirement that changes, so not species, but breeds. It's the rest requirement that changes. It probably comes down to they've been built for short bursts of very intense activity. So from what are we required for, that we put all our energy into this, and the rest of the time we're rebuilding that energy. And of course, that is their ex-racers, then that's very much reinforced by how they are kept in the racing kennels, which is you go in there and you stop until you're needed, and then you come out and you go. So they're not only are they bred for it genetically, if they come from that background themselves, they're also had that trained into them as well.
Like a nurture side, nature and nurture combined.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make them wonderful pets. I have to say, big soft spot.
Okay, so they rest more than the other breeds because of that genetic. I need to go and run, and then they're sprinters, not marathons. So kind of they often get compared to things like cheetahs and bigger cats and things like that because they have that same kind of like napping side of things. So
yes, which is perfect. And a cat, by the way, would do all these things I'm talking about with sleep cycles and spindles and thalamuses. All of that is cats as well.
Okay.
Anyway, I know you're all very dog people, but if any of you've got a cat, this is just relevant.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Definitely not with a sighthound. Unlikely to have a cat.
Or if you have, you've got a very fast one, probably.
Yes.
Or a natural climber, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
We've had another question come in that says, what would your sleep expectations be for a recently rescued dog, and does stress affect sleep? So I think you've already mentioned that pain can affect sleep.
Yeah, so pain certainly will affect sleep. As we all know, if you've had a sore neck or whatever, it will wake you. Even the best TRN in the world can't get past a really painful joint. But we know that poor sleep will reduce that threshold for where pain will break through. But stress also, absolutely. You end up in a very hyper-vigilant state. I liken it to sleeping at home versus sleeping at your mum's versus sleeping in a hotel room. Home, fine, super safe. Your mum's, you recognise it. You probably, you may well have grown up there. You spend a lot of time there. It might be your childhood bedroom. It's not quite the same as being in your own bedroom, but safer than a hotel room. You find you're in your local travel lodge and you can just hear everything, can't you? The drip of the tap, or if the heat's slightly up, you just can't sleep properly. And that's because your brain is in this really hyper-vigilant state, which basically tries to keep you in the early sleep stages so you're easier to rouse in case something happens. So you can end up with a dog that gets quite a lot of hours, but how much time are they spending in each of our different stages? They tend to spend more time in light sleep when they're hypervigilant.
Would that be the same then, Lauren? Because I've mentioned to Claire that I've got the privilege of working with a lovely lurcher puppy. So it's a nice tie-in to the connection that Claire and I have with her passion for sighthounds. And they've done an amazing job with getting this beautiful pup to be in the den, and sleep in there. And she goes in there willingly and loves it. And it's a fine balance between then that they're getting the cuddles on the sofa and kind of, and having that relationship and bond. But, how does that fit in then with regards to the den being the bedroom, for us, our home bedroom, and I guess the sofa's the potential family home or the hotel, I guess.
Yes, I think exactly. I think so we talked just very briefly before about dogs being polyphasic sleepers, right? So overnight isn't enough for them, which means they fundamentally have to have quality sleep in the day. That we usually take that more likely in the afternoon because they've built up quite a lot of sleep overnight. They tend to be fairly awake in the morning, and then we'll start to nap more and more, heading towards an evening routine. So that's worth taking into account. So if they're looking sleepy in the early afternoon, that might be time to say, actually, you probably need some really good quality sleep here. If they just want to snuggle with you at 10 a.m., they're probably still pretty well rested from their time overnight. So time of day can be really helpful for kind of making some of those decisions for them and say, actually, where should we be having this rest? But also, you know what? A good cuddle, the endorphins from a cuddle and how that's going to make you feel. I like a cuddle before I go to sleep. I then like to be like, and now you go to the very far side of the bed because I don't want no challenge to my TRN. you can go over there. But that feeling of warmth and connection is really important for quality sleep. That's what builds the safety when they go in the den. If they don't feel safe in the home, then being in the den isn't going to be the answer to that.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you very much.
That's great, thank you. Lauren, we're getting a lot of questions coming in.
Excellent. I love it. I might not be able to answer them all, but keep them. I've not even talked about Sleep Startle yet, and we are two.
I know we are definitely covering that because it's a question I get so much. So we're definitely covering it. So somebody said, Oh, Angela said, also, if humans experience pain or other things differently if they're sleep deprived, do dogs have the same symptoms?
We believe so. We are sparse on some of the research, but the papers that do exist, they're often combining it with various pain medications and things like that, insinuate that it does. And the World Small Animal Veterinary Association's pain guidelines that they published a couple of years ago, so that they believe that there's enough evidence to say, yes, in dogs, sleep deprivation will increase pain perception. I think there's still more work to be done on it. So I always like to put some caveats in there. But again, coming back to that kind of guilty until proven innocent, if we know it's happening in people and we have some evidence that it's there in dogs, I think it's a really important thing that, especially when we're talking about chronic pain conditions, we really need to be looking into.
Considering it, because she's also said, is it possible that this can come out as aggression in dogs? So I suppose, just as you were describing at the start, that you can be more irritable about the dishwasher.
100%. So you can, and that kind of can come across almost like, it's a word called allodynia, and it means like pain that's just seems completely a different pain response to what you'd expect from what that problem is. And sometimes even you see what looks like a pain response, but from some sort of connection with the dog, an area distant from where the actual problem is. So just a pain response that doesn't seem to match the physical symptoms. And that can absolutely be seen or exacerbated by sleep deprivation, because you get that double whammy of it hurts more, and also just get off me. Like I can't tolerate this interaction right now.
And that's the puppy biting for sure. I always know that if a puppy's biting an awful lot for a young dog, it's often because they're not having enough sleep and they're just getting into that, like, just leave me alone.
Yeah. We thought, what we've all been there.
Definitely. So it's often, if they get enough sleep, then the biting does normally calm down a lot more in that sense. So.
Yeah, the overtired puppy. Another one we've got is, we've also been told not to wake a sleeping greyhound, but would this apply to them in all different states of sleep? So all the different states.
Yeah, so I think, especially with greyhounds, because of their propensity to sleep startle, and in general, I wouldn't wake a sleeping dog unless you really have to, because we know that they physiologically require more sleep than us. And if they're having that physiologically required sleep, I would really leave them to it. If they've managed to get, if you have to go out, you have to go out. The world exists around, and the dog has to fit in, doesn't it? At the same time, there has to be some give and take. So I would say, whenever you're going to be waking a dog, it needs to be, I would always use verbal cues to wake a dog. Start soft. Wouldn't wake a dog with a physical touch at any point. Like any dog with physical touch, I wouldn't want to be woken up by a physical touch. That would jump scare me, being woken up by someone's hands on me. We don't wake each other up like that, do we? No. I mean, the only person who does is my daughter, who jumps on my husband, and he hates it. So that's his sleep startle.
And I think, like you say, you don't know how you'd react if you're in a very deep sleep and someone startled you. You don't know how you're going to react. So there's a couple of other questions which I think will feed into some of what you're saying. But the sleep startle side of things, so then how does that, are the dogs in a certain stage of sleep when they sleep startle, or can it happen in all different stages, or how does that work?
It can happen at any point, but there are some risk points. So one of those is the transitional stages between sleep. Actually, which is quite guided by sleep spindles with those things that the TRN are making. They also help us transition into different stages of sleep. They're really important in how sleep architecture is formed. And those transitions, they believe, are those where they might come slightly lighter and therefore be more likely to be woken by quite a small noise. We also have REM sleep, so they can self-startle through dreams, or they can be startled by an external stimulus.
It's like us, isn't it? How many of us have had a nightmare and you might suddenly jump, wake yourself up, don't you?
Yeah,
absolutely. And they can
stop. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, the dogs start barking in their sleep, and it's not like a weird bark compared to normal, and then all of a sudden they jump.
Yeah, and you don't know what they're dreaming about, but especially if they've come from a ghost kennel environment, they might have had some not quite unpleasant experiences in there. And just like us, what they have experienced in their life will impact on what they dream about.
Yeah, we just I don't know if the greyhounds do it, Claire, but I know my two, that occasionally their tails are wagging, and so you can't just imagine what they must be dreaming about, because it just comes, you know, they're wagging away, and you just think, oh, they must be having such the best time ever.
We get the woofing and the chasing, and it was really interesting. We had Freddie saw a bit of a tangent, but Freddie saw like this. We had a walk where there was loads of squirrels, and he was so like, whoa! And he came back, and that night there was so many like woofs and little running, and we're like, oh, I think
we know what you're thinking about.
You're dreaming about the squirrel chasing, because there was all these little like twitchy runs after them. So the sleep startle, they can be in different stages, but is it basically so they can interrupt themselves and kind of jump out of it, which is why we get that kind of aggression kind of response, or it can be quite light and a human's interrupted that and that can cause it.
Yes, absolutely. It's going to be an external thing or an internal thing that can happen. The vulnerable periods are when they're dreaming and between sleep stages. They believe it's quite hard to track, because like we said earlier, the only way you can really find out what's going on is probes, and it's kind of that no one's going to be doing that research, I don't think, anytime soon. But they believe that between those stages you create this kind of period of vulnerability, where you kind of your startle response might be heightened. And of course, if you've got greyhounds that are perhaps new to a home or have had some traumatic experience, I'm talking about Sighthounds here, but of course, Sarah, this is just as relevant for any of your cases, where they've got that kind of hypervigilance and a bit more fragmented sleep, and they aren't sleeping as well. They're going to have more of those periods where sleep startle could happen, because their sleep will be more broken. So because they're not sleeping well, they will therefore be more likely to startle, which will of course then wake them up. It can be you end up in quite a negative feedback loop with that.
Which would make sense where we see it a lot in, you know, it can happen with any dog, but we see it a lot in newly adopted. So they've gone from like racing kennel environment to pet life. So as you say, they've technically gone from what was home to the travel lodge. And then the life is a lot more stimulated. And then, so we're not necessarily getting the sleep. So the spindles aren't there in the same way. And then so they're not sleeping as well. Plus, there's so much more going on in the world. Heightened state of, this is just new and different. Even if it's the most perfect home, there's a change there, and then that can trigger that.
And these dogs, I mean, they've got huge prey drive, right? There's so much that they sleep with their eyes open a lot of the time. And those optic nerves, they're still working. The light is still coming in, so they can, even though they're asleep, they can still be startled by something visually. That prey drive means that what happens is when they are startled, so you've got kind of two things going on. You've got we're coming round, we're awake now, and you have a threat assessment center, which is your amygdala, which is your fight or flight center. So what happens in these guys is they're so attuned and they're so on it that the amygdala wakes up before the rest of the brain. So the fight or flight kicks in. That bit goes, what the hell's happening? Bite, snap, growl, bark, whatever it is. And then seconds later, the rest of the brain. And that's why you quite often get that. And then they go, oh, sorry.
Right, that makes complete sense. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, totally. And I'm thinking a lot of the international rescues that we get in the UK, and then there's quite a popular rescues in my local area, and I think that transition, and travel and all that build up of how, they wouldn't have had much sleep over time, and trying to give them that adjustment. And you often get a dog and don't necessarily understand that they need a little bit more time and adjustment, rather than just going straight out on a walk, because we're so conditioned to think, oh, my dog needs a walk, this is going to make them feel better. And actually rest is likely to be a better medicine and support for them to adjust more successfully than actually taking them in to see the environment that is going to be too stimulating for them.
Yeah, actually we need to just kind of work out what's going on, what the hell is first.
That's so interesting about that prey drive, and with them sleeping with their eyes open and still seeing. So again, the movement doesn't actually have to be, I think some people have in their head, well, if I physically touched the dog to wake them up, but I didn't physically touch them, I just went by them, but it's going to have that same quick
so motion. For example, beds with a visual barrier, if you can put like a bit of their blanket over, or even a bed with a bolster, so that when they're lying there, you've got a visual barrier that can be really helpful. At the same time, conversely, just to kind of flip that, another way of looking at it though is if you've got a very anxious dog, they sometimes like to sleep back against the wall. I can see the door, because that makes me feel safe there. So that's very dependent on the dog, and I would leave that to.
And some like the higher sofas. That's where they used to sleep. Yeah. So
I mean,
that's great.
Say, Claire, there's a couple of questions.
I was going to say there's a couple more questions, so let me go through those.
Well, if you want, I'll talk about Jane, because they're tied together. So Jane was asking about, how much sleep does the dog need? We covered that earlier, which was 10 to 14 hours. But she had a really good one that follows on from that just said, what are there any supplements that dogs can have? Because actually, magnesium is one that's recommended for humans to help sleep. Is there a supplement that you to help dogs that can, you recommend?
Again, I'm going to say we're shy on evidence. So I'm always very cautious recommending things. I got into sleep once I'd left being a practicing vet. I don't dispense now. However, I have colleagues who have tried melatonin in dogs with good effect. We are talking a small sample size, and more anecdotal than proven. But melatonin might be helpful for dogs, especially that are getting out of their sleep-wake cycles, thinking about these greyhounds that are waking at 3 to 5 in the morning. They might be candidates for supplementary melatonin and things like that. But I think that would have to be in conjunction with the local vet of that dog and try and find it out. With an eyes open that it might not do anything. As with all supplements, there's always that.
No, absolutely. And that prompts me, because again, coming back to the human side of things, I know my circadian rhythm. So that is, you want to be up with the daylight if you can, and go to bed when it goes dark. So people who work night shift really struggle with their sleep patterns, don't they? Because their whole rhythm is out of the play. So I know if I wake up, I want to get out into that sunlight to make sure that my body knows that it's daytime.
Absolutely.
Do the dogs have the same type of thing?
They 100% do. Yeah, absolutely. All of those things that you're talking about are completely the same for dogs. All the way that works in terms of light into the eyes and the parts of the brains that are stimulated, and the creation of melatonin to create their sleep-wake cycles are all exactly the same as what happens in a human brain.
It poses a question for me, Claire, that I wonder if you don't take your dog out first thing in the morning, then just because sometimes you may not get out until lunchtime, it'd be interesting to understand whether or not that might have an impact on their quality of sleep later, because their routine is slightly adjusted for one factor, but also the fact they're not getting that circadian rhythm like we would be, first thing in the morning.
I would totally consider those sad lamps, that create the daytime light. If you've got, for example, dogs waking up very early in the morning, you want to transition their routines. Light and dark cycling and controlling that with blackout blinds and lamps and getting out first thing in the morning is a really important way of starting to tackle that. Although I have to say, I always say the first thing, if you've got them working up really early, you just have to accept you're going to wake up really early for a little while, because this is not an overnight fix. And on average, I would suggest to move their routine by 15 minutes every 4 or 5 days. So if you're 3 hours out, it might take you the best part of 3 months to get them to where you want to be, but slowly and steadily.
That makes sense.
No, I totally agree.
Steph has put a question in there. What about dogs that follow you around the house? When I move, so does Shadow. Will this add to his anxiety and reactivity? I think from everything you've said, the potential is if he's not getting enough sleep and those spindles aren't in place, then the most likely answer is.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things we saw during COVID, was that everyone thought it was great. Oh, my dog's going to be thrilled. I'm home all the time. And actually all these dogs were getting a really good 4-hour nap in the afternoon undisturbed. And suddenly no longer. There's a lovely research paper by Sarah Heath that shows owners waking their dogs from sleep because they're worried that their dogs are bored. All of this stuff comes from deep love, and it's of course, I I've definitely woken dogs before I got into all of my sleep things. You know, you're right down there, darling, like comfy. It was comfy, it was asleep. Like, what did I do that for? But so it comes from a really good place. But actually, I've spoken to some behaviorists now who are sending people back to the office. Like, you just need to leave it alone.
Yeah.
Oh, it's why doggy daycares can be such a difficult environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very few are set up for dogs to get any kind of rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed with the nap. So many questions. This is brilliant. Thank you. So one of the things that we were talking about before that we wanted to talk about, that if these sleep routines are out and the dog isn't getting enough sleep, what are things that we can do to set them up for success from kind of our point of view as pet parents or pet guardians, or for trainers, for myself and Sarah, to recommend to really get that good quality sleep for those dogs and get a decent routine, so we're not getting all of these kind of issues cropping up?
The first thing you said was a clean routine. Routine is a massive part of getting good sleep for us and for them. Sarah, you mentioned exercise earlier. So you don't want to be exercising just before bed, because that's just, you've got everything going. But getting some decent exercise in the early evening is a really lovely time. And then it's a bit of mental stimulation just before bed can be really helpful. Just make sure your brain tired and body tired. And this is all stuff we do for ourselves, right? Start to dim the lights. Think about what kind of sound you want to play overnight. Are they happy sleeping in the quiet? Some dogs like white noise. Some dogs like to have a radio on low. Those things can block out unusual sounds. So if you have got a dog that's sleeping poorly and maybe their TRN isn't doing a very good job of blocking new sensory input, actually, if you've already got low level noise and then something else is firing but it's below that, then that might not then break through.
Like a fox running around the house.
Yeah, exactly. It's really common. Yeah,
if they've got something else playing, so that can be really helpful. Where your bed is, we've touched on this. Sarah, you mentioned things like the sofa versus being on the bed. I would always say make sure it's somewhere where if they do fall asleep, you've not got a lot of traffic. So dog beds in the kitchen are something I'm always like, think of that like a sofa. There's nothing wrong with having a dog bed in your kitchen. The dog will love to be in there with you guys hanging out. Like, what a home, what a fantastic place. And they should have somewhere comfortable to be. That shouldn't be their main bed, because who's in there? You putting the kettle on, clanking the pots, the kids are coming in from school, shoes everywhere. It's really hard to get quality sleep in the kitchen. It wouldn't be where I would choose to sleep anyway. So it's trying to make sure they've got different spaces that they can go to. And then, of course, the bed itself, my, of course, absolute love is dog beds and getting them right. I made a whole company around it. So our Ortholux beds are very much designed to support sleep. So we always tell people to measure their dog. We don't do, it's Labrador sized or a big one or a small one. Measure the dog, nose tip to tail base, add a couple of centimeters, and your bed needs to be at least that long. Okay. And that just means then that the dog can decide in whatever position they want to be in. Sometimes people say, oh, well, my dog sleeps curled up. I say, well, so do I, but I don't have a toddler mattress.
Yeah.
Mattress, because then if I don't want to sleep curled up, I could.
I've actually got a really good example of that behind me. So my boy, we've got a really tiny bed for his sister normally goes in it, but tonight he has gone in there, and he's literally curled up in a tiny little ball.
Oh.
But he's got two other beds that are huge, and the ones in our bedroom are massive. So overnight, we know we needed to have a bigger bed, but I mean, he's thoroughly enjoying the live, Lauren.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, so a lot of the beds have come from your research, from everything you did with kind of beds, and you were mentioning, I think possibly before we came on, that you've been involved in bed making for the care sector, and for people with chronic pain, and for people that hospitals, end of life, all sorts of people, places, and understanding how important those beds are to that recovery or well-being of that particular person in that particular situation. So you brought a lot of this science into your beds, haven't you? They've not just gone, oh, we've made a nice wide one.
No, exactly. Well, it's trying to, we've really designed them for sleep quality, but to do that, we've really focused on it being supportive for joints, for dogs who might not feel confident using a lot of things. So it's really accessible for all dogs is what we've really tried to focus on. So there's a couple of ways that we've done that. So one is we've made them deeper as they get bigger. So that we call that walk on, walk off height. So you want it so that your dog isn't climbing up or climbing down in and out of the bed, but it just gives them, if it's a little bit higher, a bit of a boost. If you think of it like getting up from the floor versus getting up from, I said the yellow pages the other day, and a very young vet nurse looked at me like I'd grown another head. No. So I'm now having to say small stool. I grew like a grey eyebrow hairs when I realised she'd never heard of the yellow pages. But just it doesn't take a lot to make a big difference to how easily it is to mobilize. So if you've got a really low bed and you've got a dog with, for example, some joint pain or stiffness or whatever, actually getting up from the floor versus just being able to have front paws out and bums already halfway there is huge, because it's not just about sleep quality. We don't want them trapped there either. Mobilization is also a really important part of their life and routine. So you need to be able to get in and out safely. And that's, we also have a non-slip base. We always recommend that people also put non-slip things around the bed. We totally, especially if you've got dogs with joint disease, get a few yoga mats and chuck them around the bed. It just helps them feel super secure. And the foam that we've used, the way it works is it is really pressure relieving, and we've pressure mapped it and all that good stuff, all of the clinical evidence. But it also, when they put their paws on it, they don't just sink in, especially if they've got pain or they've got cognitive dysfunction, which is like doggy dementia. If they put their paws on something and it gives way, they're just like, no, I'm not. That is scary, and I'm not going to use it. So it needs to be supportive enough, again, for them to get in and get comfortable and feel safe to use it, but also to be able to protect their joints and spread all of that load across all of the less vulnerable tissues. So yeah, we've put a lot of time into it, actually, which but we see the results. I get some fantastic feedback, and I get a lot of pictures of happy sleeping dogs, which makes my day.
Oh, fabulous. That's really helpful. And if people want to find your beds, where can they find you and find your beds?
Yeah, so it's Vet Relieve, www.vetrelieve.co.uk. We are on Instagram and Facebook at Vet Relieve UK. You can find me on @the Sleep Vet on Instagram as well. I'm always happy to chat to anybody about sleep, any time of the day, for as long as you'll listen to me. So please do. Anyone who wants to get in touch, please do. I'm always open to chatting to anyone. If they've got a dog that they want some help with, or if anyone's got a case that they want some support with, or just a lingering question, come and find me.
Oh, that is absolutely fabulous. It's so fascinating, and I think there's been so much about the sleep startle and so much has clicked in what you've said. It's really wonderful to be able to explain that in a much clearer way to people, and I think we've seen it there for so long, but it makes so much sense. And I think when we've talked to you in the past, you sort of say, if you're in that like really deep sleep phase as well, someone comes and wakes you up, you feel sick and everything, don't you? Because you're
horrible. Yeah,
your body's gone into this, everything's elsewhere working. So
all the blood's down here, it's not up there.
And then the brain's like catching up, which is why you can feel like, oh. And I suppose the dogs have the same instance in that REM kind of stage of sleep as well.
So interesting.
No, thank you so much for your time. It's just been,
I'm pleased you've enjoyed it.
Absolutely fascinating. No, absolutely loved it. And thank you so much for coming along. And thank you to everyone that's asked some great questions. We've had some brilliant questions come in. So
if you find more, ask them. Send them
yeah. We'll keep an eye
if you say that, we'll definitely be keeping in touch.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on the comments, and should any questions come up, we'll get in touch, Lauren and stuff. So, but no, really helpful. I think it's going to be a great one for people to watch back on as well.
Yeah. So thank you so much. And Angela said thank you. That's really helpful and interesting. So lovely. Thank you so much for your time. And take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.